There are people who don't need a knife or poison. They just need to see you eating. You might think it's an exaggeration, but what if I told you that the food someone offered you, with a smile on their face, was the gateway to the worst phase of your life? I'm not talking about food poisoning. I'm talking about something spiritual, invisible, silent, but real. In this video, you will not hear just one more testimony. You will find out how food can be a weapon in the wrong hands, and why some people, they insist so much on giving you something made with love. Don't leave now. What you're about to hear may change the way you trust people, and perhaps make you rethink everything you've ever accepted without question. Open your eyes. This story begins now. My name is Erica Sanchez, and I was one of the most discreet and dangerous experts in the spirit world. I didn't use weapons. He didn't perform open rituals in cemeteries. My work was quiet, clean, and devastating. My instrument of destruction was food. But make no mistake, I was no bubbling potion cook. What I was doing was much more subtle and much more common than you might think. I prepared consecrated elements to be placed in other people's food, powders, anointings, essences, and spiritual objects that, when inserted into food, became weapons. And whoever ate it was sealed. The scariest thing? Most of the time, the person who placed these elements was someone from the family itself. Sometimes a wife wants to hold on to her husband. Sometimes a mother trying to calm her child. Other times, a distracted believer who received something ready-made without discernment and took it to the cell, to church, or to a company party. I've been trained for this since childhood. I was born into a family where the occult was inherited. When I was 7 days old, I was consecrated to the demons by my grandmother, a feared woman in the city. No one called her a witch. She was the woman who solved. But what no one knew is that she resolved it with blood, pacts, and offerings made at the foot of spiritual altar. My childhood was marked by whispers, by shadows, by eyes that I saw on the walls. While other children played, I was initiated. I learned to converse with entities, to recognize spiritual signs in common objects, and to obey orders that came from the invisible world. The more I served, the more power I received. At the age of 12, my grandmother called me the guardian of cursed flavors. She showed me that food was the easiest bridge between the natural and the spiritual, because nobody can resist food. She enters without suspicion, without prayer, without preparation. It passes through the body and goes straight into the spirit. I learned how to prepare anointings for coffee, powders for rice, essences for sweets, small things, invisible. But when they were included in food, they carried with them bonds, curses, illnesses, emotional ties, confusion, and even sterility. I was trained to detect people's weaknesses just by what they liked to eat. A needy woman? A cake would be enough. An impulsive teenager? A consecrated sweet. A man obsessed with control? A subtle mix in your morning juice. It all seemed like affection, but it was a trap. My fame grew in the spiritual world. I was called upon to create destruction kits, powders for weddings, essences for ministries, anointings for rival businesses, and everything was delivered with a smile, sometimes for a wife, sometimes to an employee, sometimes to a brother in faith. The cruelest? Many of my targets were Christians, good people, but distracted, who trusted too much, who prayed too little, who ate everything without thinking. And I saw the spirit circling the tables, waiting for the moment when the first fork would be lifted. I've become an expert at contaminating destinations with food, not with physical poison, but with spiritual elements that transformed a simple dish into a disguised altar. If this story has alerted you, don't downplay it. The spiritual world is real, and many are being attacked through their mouths without knowing it. Subscribe to the channel now. Here, the veil is being torn, and if you follow me, you will discover how to protect yourself, how to pray, and how to discern the dishes that seem present but carry destruction, but you still don't know the worst. I'll tell you exactly what I did with these powders and anointings, as each one had a specific function, and why, even today, there are people suffering because of something they ate years ago. Are you ready to understand what really lies behind what you call just a snack? So stay with me. The truth is still half told. Now that you know who I was, it's time to reveal what I put in my food. And, unlike what many people imagine, the power was not in the food itself. It was in what was hidden inside her. I never had to prepare full meals. My job was to create the invisible elements that would be inserted later, by seemingly innocent hands. They were small portions of spiritual destruction, and each of them had a clear purpose. Sometimes I would prepare consecrated dried herbs, crushed until they became a fine powder, almost imperceptible to the taste. Other times they were thick, dark liquids stored in small bottles, prepared in fasting and silent rituals, away from common eyes. Each mixture was made over a ritualistic symbol, activated by words that only initiates could pronounce. Nothing was random. Everything had a target. Did a wife want her husband to be more submissive? I gave her a preparation extracted from specific roots, consecrated to drain the spirit of leadership. She only needed to drip 2 drops on the beans. Over time, the man became apathetic, unresponsive, too quiet. The woman thought it was peace, but it was spiritual control. A mother-in-law wanted to separate her son from her daughter-in-law. I advised spreading a certain substance on the rice served on Sundays. She didn't need to know exactly what was there. I just had to follow the instructions. Little by little, fights, insults, and rejection for no reason began. And when the couple separated, the spirit behind smiled. There was a time when a merchant came to me asking for something simple. I want the other restaurant to stop having business. I created a compound using consecrated incense ash, black candle fragments, and a powder extracted from dried insect carcasses. He took it to the location and applied it discreetly on the counter, near the utensils. Nobody saw. But from then on, the problems began. Food spoiling, customers complaining, an inexplicable bad smell. In less than 3 months, the restaurant went bankrupt. The most wicked? It was just that most of those involved thought they were just finding a way around it. The person who placed the elements did so out of love, out of fear, out of greed. But hell doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about legality. I became an expert at reading spiritual weaknesses and turning them into a formula. Each concoction I created was like a key, tailor-made to open a specific door in the victim's spirit. Some caused disease, others created addictions, others blocked sentimental life, prevented spiritual growth, and drained a person's spirit. The most ordered were for split couples, destroy ministries, bring the loved one, cure addictions, dry up finances, drive people crazy, diseases that doctors couldn't figure out led to death and turned people away from God. And the channel was always the same: a plate, a glass, a seemingly ordinary snack. You've probably eaten next to someone who smiled at you while you waited for the spell to take effect. Maybe someone has already touched the food with fingers anointed in darkness before handing it to you with care. And what was supposed to be an afternoon coffee became an invisible chain. Now it's your turn to speak. Write in the comments, I break every spiritual tie that entered my mouth in the name of Jesus. This statement is more than a comment. It is a prophetic act. It's a cut, a stop, a shield. And everyone who reads this will remember that not every dish comes with just seasoning. In the next part, you will understand how the effects of these elements act over time. What are the most common spiritual symptoms, and why so many are suffering today because of something they ate 5, 10, or 20 years ago. Believe me, the stomach digests, but the spirit does not forget. Spiritually contaminated food does not always act immediately. Most of the time, she plants a seed, and this seed grows silently until it blossoms into illness, misfortune, confusion, addiction, or destruction. From the outside, everything looks normal, but inside, the person's spirit is slowly being erased. It destroys the soul from within, little by little, until the body can no longer take it. During the years I served the darkness, I saw with my own eyes people slowly wasting away after ingesting hidden preparations. And the worst part? No one ever found out what was going on. Why the tests were normal, the medicines didn't work, and the diagnosis was always, we don't know. There was a case that left a deep impression on me. A middle-aged woman, full of life, respected in the neighborhood, healthy. She received a dessert from an acquaintance that seemed innocent, as I know you love sweets. I made it at home and brought it to you. The dessert was contaminated with an essence of torment, made with poisonous roots consecrated in blood. She started losing weight without stopping. I slept and woke up with pain that no doctor could explain. He lost his appetite, his skin color, his lucidity. It was 8 months of agony. In the end, the doctors said it was a nervous system breakdown. But I knew. She died spiritually first. Her body just followed. I also saw young people get sick with what they called anxiety disorder. But what they were carrying was a spirit of panic that had entered through a glass of juice, given by a well-intentioned friend, but guided by someone who had bought me an emotional preparation. These young people began to see figures in the dark, feeling like they were being persecuted, hearing voices, not being able to sleep for days. And in 2 of the cases, they committed suicide. The families cried without understanding, but I knew they didn't want to die. They just wanted to escape from what no one else saw. There was also a couple who attended church. Solid marriage, children, plans, daily prayer. One day, the wife prepared a dinner to welcome a friend from the past, who showed up with a homemade cake as a gift. The husband ate. 3 days later, he no longer looked at his wife with the same look. He began to avoid the room, saying he was confused, lost. And after opening a chasm between the couple, love was gradually eroded, and days later, he abandoned everything to be with that woman, the same one who had brought the cake. The wife begged, cried, prayed, but he said, "It's like something in me has switched off." And it had, because inside that cake, there was an essence of seduction and breaking of alliances. And the nightmares. The nightmares. I have seen men lose their sanity after years of nightly torment. It always started the same: dreams about snakes, graves, cemeteries. Then, beings that held them at night, that pressed on their chest. Then, laughter in the dark. Then screams. And finally, the madness. One of them walked naked down the street, saying he was being chased by eyes growing out of the walls. Another locked himself away for months, writing symbols on the mirrors of his house, repeating that he needed to shut up. Both had eaten at religious celebrations where I was called to consecrate the elements hidden in typical dishes. And the most revolting, most of these victims, I never knew what really hit them. They thought it was psychological, genetic, emotional, but it was spiritual. It was consecrated food. It was destruction served in silence. So when I see someone saying, "It's just a piece of cake," I tremble inside, because I know what might be hidden there. And now I need to ask you, can you remember if your pain had a visible origin, or was it served at the table without you knowing? If something in you woke up reading this, do not ignore. You may be living the effect of something that entered your mouth and sickened your spirit. Comment now with faith and courage. If there is anything planted inside me that did not come from God, let it be expelled now in the name of Jesus. This prayer can break chains that no one sees. You can free your house. It can prevent the curse from advancing to your children. And now, I'll tell you how it all started to fall apart for me. It all started the day I stopped seeing people as targets, and I started to feel the pain I was causing. That's when a young woman, just 19 years old, appeared dead after weeks of fighting panic attacks. She had eaten a sweet given to her by her stepmother. It was a dessert prepared with one of my mental preparations, given to her, with activation carried out by my hands. I remember her laughing. I remember the yellow dress. I remember the joy. And then from the coffin, closed, because her face no longer looked human, that tore me apart. And for the first time, after years of service, I asked myself, when will this stop? How far does this cycle go? Will I ever have peace? The question was innocent. But to the kingdom of darkness, it was treason, and it was exactly there that my punishments began. That same night, I felt a weight on my chest while I slept. I woke up with difficulty breathing, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw 3 claw-shaped marks on my shoulders. No one had entered. The doors were locked, but they were there. The voices that had previously instructed me began to accuse me. You are weak. You are corrupting yourself. You want to betray the pact. And more than talking, they started to act. Scratches appeared on my body without explanation. The floor of my house seemed to pulsate. The lamps burned out one by one, but nothing scared me as much as the presence that began to follow me. It wasn't just a spirit, it was a punishment. It was as if hell itself had been unleashed upon me. I heard footsteps when I was alone. I saw figures in broad daylight. My house smelled like sulfur even after it was washed. And one night while I was sleeping, I felt someone sitting on my chest. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. The room became freezing cold, and a phrase echoed in my mind so strongly that it hurt. "You're going to die, Erica." And I believed. But as strange as it may seem, the more they punished me, the more I understood that I needed to leave. Every pain, every attack, every torment showed me that I was no longer theirs. Something inside me screamed, and that scream was the only sound they couldn't drown out. It was at this time that I began to have visions, dreams where I saw people praying for me, faces I had never seen, churches I've never stepped foot in, and a strange presence, not threatening like the spirits I lived with, but firm, silent, just observing. This presence bothered me more than hell, because I knew Era, the God creator of all things, the one I was always forbidden to talk about. He whose name, when pronounced, made the entities that guided me writhe with hatred. And it was when that name began to haunt my thoughts, even without me saying it, that spiritual persecution increased. I started bleeding from my nose during prayers. I lost consciousness inside stores, buses, religious services. One time I fell backwards in the middle of the street and woke up with my face scratched on the asphalt. They wanted me dead before I left, before counting, before reporting. But it was too late, because inside me, the scream had already started. And they knew I was about to break through. If you feel like hell is also trying to silence you, now is the time to react. Write in the comments with faith and courage. There is power in the name of Jesus, and you will see that there is no chain he cannot break. I will now tell you the exact moment when the darkness first retreated. It was there that my war turned into liberation, and it was there that I discovered that, even in silence, God was already listening to me. They thought they were destroying me, but what they didn't know is that they were pushing me straight to the one name they can't bear to hear. For years, I was taught never to say that name. In my initiations, in the ceremonies, in the nights of invocation, he was forbidden. They said that all we had to do was say it out loud, and we would lose the spiritual protection that surrounded us. And what if someone said the spirits would revolt? It was all true. That night, I was lying on the living room floor, the weak body, the soul trembling, all dark, the air heavy, the voices whispering, "You won't get out alive. You are ours. No one can save you now." But it was there, in the middle of it all, that a memory invaded my mind. A neighborhood lady, years ago, who said to me with firm eyes, "When you feel like you are being swallowed by darkness, when everything seems hopeless, don't hesitate. Call on Jesus, even if it is with the last strength you have left." I laughed at her back then, but now, I just wanted to survive. With a dry mouth, a scratchy throat, and a numb body, I gathered what little I had left, and I whispered, almost without strength, almost voiceless, "Jesus." At that moment, the noises stopped, as if someone had turned off the world. The buzzing stopped, the environment froze, and an invisible force passed through the room. The figures surrounding me retreated. One of them shouted, another writhed as if on fire, and I knew that something bigger had come in there. I said it again, higher. "Jesus!" It was as if a sword cut through the air. I felt something leave my body, like smoke being violently pulled out. I started coughing, and for the first time in years, I breathed peace. But along with it came the crying, a cry that seemed to come from my soul, as if years of pain, blood, fear, and darkness were being washed from the inside out. And I cried. I cried like a child. I cried like someone who was being reborn. That night, I was not immediately converted, but God marked me. All hell knew. Erica was no longer theirs, and they tried. In the following days, the attacks worsened, the threats increased, the voices returned, now with hatred. But there was something different. I already knew the name, and now I was no longer afraid to use it. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Every time I said it, something in the environment changed. Every time I said it, I felt like I was one step closer to freedom. And it was in this process that the path to my liberation began to open, because the name they banned was the name that would set me free. Now it's your turn. If you also feel that something spiritual is haunting you, oppressing you, or holding you back, declare it with faith. Write in the comments, "I invoke the name of Jesus over everything that tries to destroy me." This name is not magical. It's alive. And when you call upon him in faith, hell retreats, the chains fall, and the process of liberation begins. Vor tell you right now about the day I walked into a church for the first time, and hell nearly dragged me by my hair, because there is a difference between calling on the name and giving your life to him. And on that day, they did everything to stop me, but they couldn't. After I whispered the name of Jesus that early morning, and the darkness retreated, something inside me was activated. It wasn't religion, it wasn't emotion, it was a wake up. But at the same time, it was also the beginning of the cruelest war of my life, because now, the voices had changed tone. Before they controlled me with orders, now they attacked me with accusations. Do you think God will accept you? Do you know how many lives you destroyed? Your hands are covered in blood. You cursed children. You planted death on the tables of entire families. Your soul is already ours. Your going to hell is just a matter of time. These phrases haunted me night and day. And as much as I tried to believe there was a chance for me, something inside me told me I wasn't worthy. I was thinking about going into a church, but the voices mocked. Do you want to pretend to be a believer now? God does not want traitors. He wants saints. You're nothing but a pretty coffin on the outside and rotten on the inside. And I believed. Until one day, in the middle of a crisis, alone at home, I cried on my knees on the kitchen floor. I didn't cry asking for release. I cried asking for forgiveness, even without knowing if anyone was listening, even though I thought it might already be too late. The next day, something pushed me out of the house. It wasn't courage. It was as if someone said, "Go, just go." I walked to the nearest church. My steps were heavy, as if they were dragging chains. Each meter seemed like a sentence, and the voices continued, "If you cross this gate, you will die. You're going to go crazy. They will know who you are." But I went, tremendous, embarrassed, and deep down, still afraid that God would reject me. When I arrived, I stopped in front of the gate. I heard the chants, people smiling, families with children on their laps, and I was there, a shard, a body full of marks, a soul full of packs. The voices rose. "You're going to bring shame to this place? They will kick you out. You are already condemned." At that time, I felt something pulling my hair back, as if invisible hands wanted to keep me away from the entrance. I fell to my knees on the sidewalk, alone, crying, ashamed of who I had been, and fear of who I might become. But even without strength, I whispered, "Jesus, if you still want someone like me, let me in." And he left. The voices disappeared. The pressure was released from my chest. The weight fell off my shoulders. And when I looked up, the doors were open, as if they were waiting for me. I went in. No one looked at me sideways. Nobody judged me. And even without understanding everything, I felt I was no longer alone. For the first time, God was there. And he wasn't angry. He had open arms. If you also believe that God cannot accept you, today is the day to silence those voices. Comment now with faith, as if stepping on the accusation. Even with dirty hands, he calls me by name. This sentence is an act of faith. It's a slap in the face from hell. It is the reminder that Jesus came for the sick, not the perfect. The liberation was not as many think. She didn't come with flowers, soft music, or pretty tears of regret. My liberation was a war zone. The first service I attended as someone willing to break free from hell, I couldn't even raise my hands. The weight on my body was unbearable. It was like something was holding me by the back of the neck. While others worshipped, I trembled. My eyes were burning. My hands were tingling. And I heard the most violent sentence I have ever heard inside me. "If you don't leave now, we'll destroy you right here." But I stayed. And when the pastor began to pray, I bowed involuntarily. My stomach turned, and without realizing it, I started screaming. But it wasn't my voice. The meeting turned into a spiritual battle. Believers began to intercede. The pastor laid his hands on me and declared, "She doesn't belong to you anymore. Jesus has already paid for it." It was then that everything fell apart. I threw up. A lot. The floor was stained with a thick, dark liquid that smelled rotten. I felt my back arch as if something was being ripped out. And inside me, a revolt. Screams, hatred, anger. Entities that had used me for years were now resisting letting go. "She's ours! She signed it in blood! You can't take her!" But the name of Jesus was repeated. Again, and again, and again. Each time, a part of me was freed. Each time, an invisible chain broke. Each time, hell lost control. It was hours. Hours of confrontation, screaming, vomiting, crying, and resignation. Until, suddenly, silence. I fainted. And when I woke, something had changed. The atmosphere was light. The light no longer hurt my eyes. And for the first time in almost 2 decades, I no longer heard voices. I could only hear my own sigh. Free. Liberation was the beginning, but it wasn't the end. I needed to learn to live again. The nights continued to be difficult for a while. Nightmares, memories, physical marks that took time to heal. But now, I wasn't facing anything alone. I went through spiritual counseling. I was accompanied by intercessors. And each prayer was like an inner cleaning, as if the residue of that previous life were being washed away with truth, light, and grace. Going back to sleep without fear was an achievement. Eat without suspicion, dealing with people without wanting to control, feel love without manipulation. Little by little, God was rebuilding in me what hell had destroyed: my identity, my dignity, my sensitivity, my faith. Until one day, He asked me something that surprised me. Tell your story. Don't hide, because the shame you carry is the trophy that hell still tries to use against you. But what shames you will free others. And here I am. Many people think they have gone too far. Who did unforgivable things? That was too stained to return. But let me tell you what no one has ever told you. Jesus doesn't wait for you to be clean to receive you. He receives you dirty, wounded, full of voices, and cleanses you inside. I was a servant of darkness. I was a weapon of destruction. I made pacts. I signed in blood. I set traps on plates, destroyed homes, and turned people away from God. Who is Jesus? Me, cleaned me. It lifted me up and gave me a new story. If He did this to me, no matter who you are, He can do it to you too. If this story touched you, don't go away in silence. Subscribe to the channel now. Take advantage and share with someone who is struggling with voices, nightmares, oppression, or fear. This video could be the answer that person has been silently waiting for. And now, click on the next video. There you will hear another real spiritual story, a new testimony that will crush lies from hell and open your eyes like never before. You already know that the spiritual world exists. Now, it's time to understand what He's trying to hide from you. See you there.